All right, so welcome everyone to our exciting lesson, and here we're going to talk about the basic anatomy and the structure of the explosion. The topic here is basically the simulation of the ground dust explosion, and here we are discussing about the various components that are going to contribute to the ground explosion. So I'm just going to play the video for you that I've just created with the help of the Maya fluids. So here you can see in front of you the fluids are being getting exploded, and there are basically two things which are going on. The first one is this bigger scale explosion that you could see, which is almost kind of a dust. You can say that it just exploded from the ground by the high impact explosions. And then secondly, you could also going to see some nice dust that are also being, puffed out or pop-ups because of the impact of the explosions. So basically, we are going to deal with two kinds of the fluids. One is the heavy fluids, and another one is the lighter version of the fluid from the impact of the explosions. All right, this is basically our course. Okay, so moving ahead, you could see the reaction is basically very important. So the anatomy of this reaction says to me that the most important is the shapes of the reactions. In front of me, you can see that what kind of shape it is, collecting. This is absolutely very important. It is not like the gasoline explosions. It is not the explosions happen just due to some fire explosions and also which is, take a lots of the rolling and just quickly dissolves inside the air. And as well as from the shading perspective also, the explosions from the fire, gasoline, petrol, or flashovers, these kind of explosions are totally different from the ground dust explosions. Uh, we are not focusing particularly on the ground dust explosion. It's basically the bomb which is, being, exploded, and the near surface was the dust and the ground. That just because we are saying it's a ground dust explosion. And secondly, the thing is that is it's a ground, and there isn't any liquid, or you can say the gasoline placed around, and there isn't any air to fuel ratio, so that's why the shape has been taken place in this way. Okay, so you can see that in the beginning part, we do have some brighter shading. This is why, because this is the explosion sections, and once the things are being getting explode, these are now the impacts, which is the lower ground dust, and then it's the convergence. So you may need to take down some few things from this reaction. Firstly, you can see that in the initial phase, in the starting phase, the speed is pretty much high. This is the nature of any explosions. The way it just got itself exploded or pops out, it just pops out so quickly because it has to leave an impact. Once the impact has been given, then most of the energy, or you can say almost all the energy, has been now lost. Now this reaction is now being driven just by the previous forces that it just used during the time of the explosions. The point to be noted here is that the initial speed is pretty much high, and now in the particularly in this shape, you could see that the speed has been reduced. So one needs to play around very important uh, attribute of the fluid that is called as the simulation rate scale. Obviously, we're going to discuss that up in the upcoming lessons, but those who just need some little bit refreshing about the simulation rate scale, it is that attribute that just control the overall all the parameters of the fluid. I mean, if you give 3 as a simulation rate scale, so your fluid will tend to move 3 times faster as compared to the by default value, which is 1. Okay. So now comes the important role of the reference. It is very important. There's a key to the success that is called as the reference. Always a key to the success. So I'm gonna open up some links for you. This is the first link that I got from the YouTube. That is the just I typed over there as a J Dam Strike, and this is the name you could see over there. You just need to open up the YouTube and just type over the J Dam Strike. For the sake of convenience, I've already got the video in front of me. So if I'm gonna roll it back, and you're gonna see here is the missile coming. That is the impact. Okay. So obviously there are two explosions inside over here, but we are dealing with only one. And you could see over there, we are good enough to calculate the kind of the shapes that it is now, getting with the help of the, reactions. and this is basically the end part, you may could say. Although it's reaching too high, but it isn't, you know, not a problem. We are happy to get these kind of the shapes. This is the, the point of focus. And you're also noticing that in the bottom section, there are really very, thick fluids over here as compared to our one. Let me just gonna close that up. We're just gonna minimize that up. Okay, we are not required with this one. So if you're gonna compare the shapes, we are almost, able to create that one. No doubt, we just need to, work with some few more attributes if we really need to get the very realistic, or you can say as much details, or, as much close shapes. But that's just completely okay, because if you're going to compare 2 to 3 or 4 reactions, they will also going to give you a very different result, because the dynamics isn't constant. You can't get the same things, repetitions from, at least in the case of the dynamics, okay? Particularly speaking, FX. So in this case, you can see that there are some thick fluids in the bottom also. Well, the reason why I just didn't do that thing, because these ground dust fluids are fair enough, capable of being creating the same impact which you just saw in the video. Reason why I didn't use that thing, because this was my completely my own artistic decision, where what was happening when I just use a very thick value of the fluids. The concentration was getting a little bit away. I mean, I want to particularly focus upon this particular reaction, which is a bigger scale reactions. These are just a kind of, you can say, the secondary impacts. So that is my own particular, decision, when I'll start telling you the process of creating this lighter version of the ground dust. If you're gonna play around with the transparency, you're gonna get the most darkest versions or the thicker version of the fluids. Okay, so this is just own personal choice. That's why I didn't bother to increase the transparency. Well, in this case, the transparency is, hardly zero point 0.6 or zero point 0.7, which is really very less value add. If I need to give it some more thickness, I may could drop it to somewhere around zero point 0.1 or 0.05. All right. So I guess we are good to start with the technicalities of the explosion. I think so. You have now got the basic anatomy and the structure of the explosion. So it's time to go to the Maya fluids.